Hello, everyone. Welcome. I want to share a word today that's been on my heart in this episode on why you can't dream when you're in survival mode and how the healing process actually makes room for God's vision, dream to be fulfilled in your life. I don't know if you've ever felt like you maybe used to have dreams for your life, but now you're just trying to make it through the day, trying to survive, or just focusing on healing maybe, or focusing on all the challenges around that space of survival. And I want to share a little bit about that because number one, I see that a lot in people. I see this kind of question of, how do I step into all that God has called me to? And how do I step into the dreams in my heart? And why can I not do that? And why is dreaming sometimes really hard to do? I don't know if you've ever been there, but maybe you think of yourself as a natural visionary and maybe you don't. I know that some people kind of naturally bubble up with dreams. And I know others feel like if you were to ask them, what's the dream that you have in your heart? There's kind of nothing kind of bubbling up in that season. And what I want to highlight here is that it's not necessarily a personality trait. Yes, there are naturally wired visionaries, but I believe that God has put vision and dream inside of all of us. That's why in Proverbs it says that people without a vision wander astray or perish, or all the different variations of that translation. It's because we are created by God to carry his dream and vision in our heart. Some even say that it is written in our heart, it is written in our DNA even, what God's dreams are for us. I think that's true when you begin to see kids. I love being around little kids and seeing their personalities start to unfold right off the bat. You can start to see who someone will be even from a really young age. Even in 3-6-month-year-olds, you can start to see, they love people or they don't love people, or, they love to move their bodies or they don't, or they're very interested in the world, or maybe they're more interested in putting things together. And parts of our personality are built into us. But what begins to happen over the course of our life is that if we had pain, or if we had struggles, or if we had challenges that show up, which many of us do, we can often come into a place of survival mode, of shutting down our natural mechanisms for engaging with that dreaming piece, for a simple reason, and many reasons really, but one of them, if you think about the hierarchy of needs, one of our very first needs is a need for feeling safe, a need to feel safe and seen. And then are my basic needs going to be met, like food? Am I going to have connection? And if we don't have those basic elements of being fed, basic connection, and feeling safe in that young age stage of our life, or even older in our life. Some of us have things that happened when we were older that kind of broke that boundary and that barrier. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be something that simply for us, we did not experience a reconnection and source of safety immediately following whatever the event was, or if it was an ongoing sense of just a lack of feeling safe for a season, that can begin to be wired into our nervous system. We can begin to walk in chronic stress. And here's the thing about biology, about the way that God created our biology, is that if we experienced stressors and traumas that have not been healed, even if we currently don't necessarily feel triggered by them, if we didn't heal them, they're still existing. And what can begin to happen is it's actually called cellular danger response, where the cells in our body begin to simply come and adapt to the stress that happened and now create a new pattern in our system so that adaptable so that we can actually live and exist. And let me explain that in a completely different setup. A lot of times I do running coaching and physical therapy work with runners who've been injured. And something that I see many times is that one person, let's say years ago, sprained their ankle, let's say the right ankle. Their ankle heals, but they've begun developing some unique running patterns that they don't have awareness of. So while they're running, they're kind of readjusting their form a little bit to protect that ankle. Now, mind you, that ankle is now healed. It's okay. But different cells have come around to kind of structure around that ankle to make sure that doesn't happen again. Okay, so years later, they come to me with a left hip issue. Now, you might be thinking, how could a left hip be related to a right ankle? Well, when we protect one part of our body, another part has to compensate and begins to feel the injury of that lack of normalcy in our being, if you will. And so that begins to happen in us when we've experienced stress, when we've experienced past wounds and traumas that haven't been healed. Now, I keep using that phrase, that haven't been healed, because even with the example of the right ankle, what we can do is begin retraining the brain, retraining the body and the nervous system to find out that, oh, that ankle is okay. And now start retraining the brain how to give the full weight of the body on that right ankle. That will help unlock the left hip and help them move forward freely. So you might be thinking, how does a runner have to do with stress and trauma? How does that have to do with survival? How does that have to do with my dreams? Well, let's put it all together, okay? So I want you to just think about this. Years ago, something stressful and traumatic happens. And what happens is we form around our body, maybe in our nervous system, maybe in our brain, the capacity to compensate for where that trauma got stored in our body, okay? We have learned to compensate so that it's no longer a stressor. We might compensate by shoving that pain down. We might compensate by storing it in an organ or the cells of our body, in our muscles. We might store it somewhere else, okay? So when it's shoved down and not healed and dealt with, then we begin to compensate in other areas of our being. Maybe when I see something visual in my life, I might avoid it naturally. Maybe I drive a certain way because I'm avoiding certain things. For example, years ago when I got totaled off a car with a semi-truck, pushed me off the highway, and I spun out of control. It was a natural mechanism. I wasn't afraid after doing a lot of trauma work. I wasn't afraid to drive on the freeway, but when I saw a big rig coming, I would naturally slow down, get out of the way, move lanes. I didn't do it out of fear or trauma, but I did it out of just a natural mechanism. I'd learned I'm not going to drive next to one of those anymore. And it wasn't until I was able to really release that I was able to drive next to one without any worries and knowing that I'm driving safely and okay. I learned how to do that through several different processes. Okay. So other ways that we compensate is maybe we don't sleep as well. Maybe we don't, we're on high alert during the day. And we've not even recognized that we're on high alert because it's become so natural and normal. Other ways we compensate is our body begins to become fatigued and exhausted and tired. And so we're just kind of moving through the motions. Boy, I think I've shared many times out here on the world that I had a bout of deep chronic fatigue for several years. And in that, I began to build many different mechanisms. I watched what I ate. I slept very carefully. I had my life very carefully planned so that I could preserve my energy levels. And what began to happen was that I had to unlearn those patterns as I began coming into a state of healing. As I began healing and creating safety and healing those triggers and modalities, I had to unlearn different patterns. And so I say all this to say, we might not always know when we're in survival mode. I had to learn to recognize this high level of awareness and kind of low level stress happening in me. Didn't feel like stress, but it was a high level of alert and being aware and what's going on. And it was fatiguing and exhausting my whole body and being. And so when our brain and body are trying to stay safe on a regular basis, and they're kind of on alert on a regular basis, it creates patterns and compensations in other areas of our life. And so then what that does is it begins to shut down our dreaming and vision capacity, sometimes to the point where it almost feels like that doesn't exist anymore. But I want to share that dreaming and healing go deeply hand in hand. One thing that I have seen over and over again is that as people heal, the brain begins to open up pathways that vision, creativity, dreaming, and trust begin to have room for safety in their lives. If you've experienced that before, where you go, oh, suddenly I have a burst of creativity come through. What began to happen? You were probably rested. You probably felt safe, even though you didn't know you needed to feel safe. And you probably began to have a level of trust in the environment that you were in. As we begin to regulate those pieces, this begins to bubble up and shine through. As we know, Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life, right? And this is what really God wants to establish in our life, that these longings are really something that he put inside of us, and they're actually meant to be brought together hand in hand. We need to go through the healing process so that we can dream again, and so that those dreams can create healing. When I was in that phase for my own self, I was walking through a lot of healing, and as I was, dreams began to bubble up. But as I began to pursue the dreams, I realized that my nervous system could only take me so far. And I was at this gap where I had healed to where I could survive, and I felt full of energy and I felt full of peace and life. But this gap between what I was dreaming and what I wanted to see in my life required a new level of healing. And in that process, I wanted to give up many, many times. It's like, what's the point of dreaming? What's the point of pursuing vision? And what God kept assuring me over and over again is that it's in the process of pursuing those things that you become the most healed, whole version of yourself showing up into the world. And think about it. Proverbs 13:12, a desire longing fulfilled is a tree of life. If we don't pursue that, if we don't find out what the dreams are in our heart and bring ourselves to a healing place of stepping into that, then we end up experiencing heart sickness because that longing fulfilled is not happening. And I'm not saying go out and try to make it happen, but what it required me to do is to look at that and go, who do I need to become with God in order to step into that? I need my nervous system to come up to a higher place. I need my body and my mind to believe differently. I need my heart to be healed and whole in order to even become that person that walks in that dream. And that process goes hand in hand. We walk through healing, we dream a little bit more. We walk through healing, we dream a little bit more. We get healed and whole, and we continue to dream. And I want to just release that over you, that there is actually safety and healing to hope in God. And it comes from this place of co-creating with God from a healed place. There's nothing more beautiful than doing this with God and walking through that journey with him, going through the healing process, letting your body, your nervous system, your mind be renewed and restored in the dreaming process. So if you notice that it's hard to dream, many times it could be because you have tried to step in those places before. You have not been able to see them take place. And so, you were actually right here with your nervous system, with your healing journey, and the dream is up here, a little bit higher out of your reach. And you've tried and you've tried and you've tried. And so then it becomes defeating. And you just go, I'm just going to lower the dream to something that I can do. And that's another form of survival, is that we kind of shut that part off because it was too hard to get there. And believe me, I understand that more than anything. But I also know that it's not God's best for you. What he wants is that you would go, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. And I'm going to hold that before me as a buoy to help buoy me up to where and who God has me to be. But I want to encourage you, if you've got high dreams out here, start in the little places that's going to cause you to come up a little bit higher. Because sometimes if it's too far, sometimes we end up getting discouraged over and over again. And what you need are small wins. And in that win, in that place of allowing your whole being to become something new in the process. Romans 12:2, being transfigured and transformed in the renewing of your mind of who you're becoming as you step into that dream. It's releasing survival mode and stepping into a healing process. And, I just want to encourage you, God's not done dreaming in you and through you. But your nervous system and your body were not meant to carry this alone. So I want to encourage you to step into healing those old places, those old stressors, those old wounds, and learn to walk in the peace so that your nervous system ultimately knows how to handle the dreams that God has given you. And if you're interested in any of the programs that I have, these are things that we help walk you through, especially, I believe, the peace process, simple, actionable things that you can do to help your brain, your heart, your body renew and rewire and step into a deep sense of peace so that you can walk in all that your heart has and has been called to. All right, guys, God bless, and we'll see you soon.